Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode with Josh and Kim. I think we're going to have an interesting conversation today. It's kind of going to play off some older, not older, but recent episodes that we've had. Just because it's something that's on our mind, something we're processing, we're thinking about. But before we get into that, Kim,
Yes.
what was your dream job as a kid?
My dream job I wanted to be a vet.
Like big animal vet or small animal vet?
Like I
Cats
just
and
wanted
dogs
to,
or cows?
I'm sure it was cats and dogs. I had no idea about like the big long glove thing with the cow thing.
Yeah.
100% was cats and dogs.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. What about you?
I wanted to be a cowboy. Yeah. I loved that, like the idea of that. I loved watching like Bonanza and shows like that. And I loved horses and I thought that would be so fun. However, I'm very, very allergic to horses.
Dang it.
And so that's not really a great option for me. There are other options to being a cowboy besides riding horses, but like that was part of it that made me excited. And so
I mean, could you be a cowboy and ride an ostrich
you might be able to.
or a camel?
I was thinking like even a four-wheeler. Like,
Well, that's far more practical, Josh.
there's definitely other ways of dealing with that. I don't know. I always thought that was such a cool life, and I have no experience with it. So it maybe is, maybe it isn't, and it probably largely depends on your personality or what you want. But, anyways, just thought that was fun. So today we're gonna kind of dive back into the topic of oneness, which we talked about not too long ago. But within this idea of oneness, it's Kim and I were just talking about before we started recording how there's like sometimes tough realities in it, because if you approach every situation with every person and you say, okay, somehow I'm connected to this person, somehow we're all part of the same ecosystem, and there's a little bit of me in them and a little bit of them in me, like that can lead to some really uncomfortable situations when you're dealing with someone or a situation you don't like.
Hmm?
What do you think about that?
Well, I think absolutely that's true. And I think that's something that we like to avoid at all costs. We being like believers. Because I mean, I would say me from 5 years ago, even I held this belief, and we've talked about this before too. Like there is a clear and present enemy, and you are not for them, they're not for you, and it is something to be against. However, the further I get in my journey and my relationship with the Lord, the more I realize He is in everything and in everyone. And He's encouraged me more and more to try to find Him in everything and everyone. And that would rub on me like Kim from the past,
Sure.
Because I don't know. I guess maybe it was how I was raised, or it was just the part of the journey I was in. But I really thought there were two sides and you choose. Are you on the light side or are you on the dark side? Are you on the good side or are you on the evil side? Right. And I just kind of now tend to believe that if there is truly this oneness, and that's really what we're seeking, then is there actually anyone who isn't also part of that whole? And should we actually be against them?
Hmm. Yeah, I like there's a lot of like thought process in that. And for me, one of the things goes to what we talked about in our last episode of how there's no one is a sinner, but people sin. And I would think similarly, you could say no one is evil, but they do evil things.
Hmm.
And so, um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like similar because I think when we're looking at someone who's doing something evil, we don't want to identify with the evil part. That gets real uncomfortable.
Right.
But um, but somewhere there, somewhere in a layer there, you're connected with them somehow. And I know this has been said about like spouses, but I think it can be said with anyone you interact with that they're a mirror for you. Like they show you things inside of you. And so maybe if someone is like stealing and you think that's evil, um, they're showing you something, and maybe it doesn't express itself in the same way, but maybe they're showing you something in you where like you're seeing that because you've stolen something from someone, whether it's time or money or an item or whatever it is, and that's being like you're seeing that because it's also in you, and it's an
Hmm.
opportunity for you to look into it and um, like work through something that's in you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. But I think ultimately, I think, and I feel like I'm being a broken record with this, but maybe I haven't talked about it long enough that anyone who's listening now never heard me talk about it before. So hooray. But I tend to also think like, which tree are we sourcing from? Like from the Genesis story, are we sourcing from the tree of life, or are we sourcing from the tree of knowledge of good and evil? And I think a lot of times this is where some of those lines get drawn in the sand, and it's like, well, no, I'm good and that's evil. Well, that's still the wrong tree. Right. And so when
Mm.
we see somebody like your example stealing and it rubs on us, are we going back to that tree of dichotomy, or can we take it back to the tree of life and actually operate um from the place of original intent? And can we look at things through that tree? And it doesn't mean that we then think that that is a good thing, but can we find the life in it? Can we acknowledge that there is a oneness, and what exists in them also exists in me? It's just that the energy gets transformed because I choose to govern it that way. And I think that's a hard place to be because it's not popular opinion. I'll say that.
Mhm. Yeah, there's um, our beliefs about a situation are so important because like even just in like the oneness with an evil person thought, like you have to choose to believe that that person is evil, or you have to choose to believe that they are a child of God who is in the moment doing something that's less than the optimal thing. And then you get like confirmation bias where you take on a belief and you say, well, there's evil people. And then you just start seeing evil everywhere. Whereas if you, like you were saying, like pick which tree you're going to look at. If you look at the tree of life and you try and look in for the tree of life in every situation, then whatever you walk through, whether it's a situation with another person or a health situation or a financial situation, um, you can find life in it if the tree of life is your centering focus. And that's not necessarily easy, but it is something we can learn. And I don't think people are just naturally like have a natural disposition to be one way or the other. Like, I think some of it, maybe there's some genetics involved, but I think the majority of it is learned at a very young age, whether you see lack in a situation or you see life in a situation, um,
Mm.
whether you see evil in a situation or you see good in a situation. And um, that I think that is learned at a very young age and probably not even consciously learned.
Right.
And then but it carries through, and then it's so familiar you think that that's just the way it is. Trauma really expresses itself that way a lot of times in people, and um, especially if you have situations where it's like I always or this always happens, like that's a pretty clear sign of like a belief system that now your brain is searching for confirmation because that's what you've told it is truth. And I think that this thing with the trees is so important, especially in this like conversation of oneness, because what you're what you're what the opportunity you have is to look at someone, to look at a situation, to look at yourself and say, I'm choosing the tree of life. I'm choosing to see the tree of life in this. And I think that really can shift the the paradigm of how you deal with it.
I think you're right. And I also want to be the first to say that I don't think it's easy and I don't think I've perfected it. Have I lived
Yeah.
from there and seen fruit from that? Absolutely. Have I gone back and looked at the two branches, the good and evil? Absolutely. But my desire is to be always trying to look through the tree of life and look at it from that direction. But it's also not the easiest thing because there's a
Mm.
lot of unwinding and there's a lot of undoing, um, that, at least for me, and Josh, I don't know if this has been like this for you, but there are things that I thought were innately good or innately bad. And I have to completely get rewired on that.
Hmm.
Here's a good example: the Illuminati. Do you think the Illuminati could in any way be part of the tree of life? We've been taught that it's a bad thing.
Hmm.
This is an evil, evil thing. And it is, if you're not for them, you're against them, and they will come get you, all the things, right? Like there's all of these crazy things out there. I'm not saying the Illuminati is real or not real. I'm just saying here's an example. But can I shift my thinking from good or evil to, hey, what if they're part of the tree of life as well? And in the tree of life, there is oneness,
Mm.
right? The tree of knowledge has two branches. That is not one. The tree of life has one, and everything falls into the oneness there. So, can I get to a place where I can start believing that even that is there? In our country, we're so divided over politics. Can I believe that one party or the other are both existing in the tree of life? These are just some very rough things that you probably are going to have to wrestle through. Those are some of the things that I've dealt with, and it's fine. But there are also situational things that come up every day,
Mm.
right? The guy who cut you off in traffic
Yeah.
can you look at him through the tree of life?
Yeah.
Or is it immediately, oh, that was bad?
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking of things like that. Like, man, like ideologically, this is where I want to be. But in my actual life, like, yeah, I'm not there yet. And um and not being there, there's plenty of opportunities where I see good and evil, or just evil, in situations where, you know, like in large um, groups of controlling people, in people, like you said, just driving down the road. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, yeah, the other day I was leaving work and someone ran a red light and almost hit me. And I was just like, actually mad. Like in a moment, I was like fired up and had energy. And then it was just like, okay, I can let it go. And maybe in moments you need to like have that expression of energy so that you the energy gets released. But also, like, we know the importance of words, and I don't really want to go around cursing people. And
Right.
so, like, yeah, we're all on this journey of trying to figure out what's real in this.
Here's a question. Because if I'm thinking about even just the example of traffic, I have shifted, which has felt like a good shift. I've shifted from like getting mad at people. Now I'll just be like, that was a bad decision. However, as we're talking about this subject, I'm still like definitely putting them into one branch, like one of the two branches. This is good or evil. And you have just done something bad. And so it's on that one. So I'm still like reaping from there.
Mm.
And even that, even just placing people or placing situations or whatever into one of those two branches, is that not still cursing them because it's subjecting them to the tree of knowledge? And isn't that where the curse came from?
Yeah.
Isn't that an interesting thing?
Yeah.
But then the question would be, how practically can we start shifting even those minute, like it doesn't have to be the big situations, even just in the minutia? How do we practically shift from even just putting people into the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or putting situations there into putting them into the tree of life? So when somebody cuts you off in traffic, how do you have that energy, but put it to the proper tree? That's
Mm.
my question. I mean, practically, I actually don't know. I would wonder what we can come to with this.
Yeah. That's a really interesting thought. Like, just because the energy's there doesn't mean it has to be expressed in only one way. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about the idea before of like, I don't know, emotional alchemy, or transforming energy, transmuting
Yeah.
energy, so that if one thing is really if one thing is really stuck in us, like how can we move it? How can we move the energy, um, and change it? And I think that's also something, like, this whole conversation is like a journey, because it's not just something one day you can wake up and say, well, I'm going to do it this way now. Like, there'll be so many moments where you fall back into the old pattern, but it's just about making those neural pathways, um, like, more solid. So the more you choose the new thought process, the more it's there. And so when you're having that emotional response to a situation, your instinct is going to be the way you've always done it. Maybe the way you've always done it is to bless them. Maybe the way you've always done it is to curse that person. But you're going to go to the path that you've developed the most. And so part of the journey of that is like consciously being aware and choosing a new path before you go down the old path. Or maybe even partway down the old path, whatever, but choosing a new path. And I think you can do that. I think you can learn to create new neural pathways, to create new routes and new energy. And then it isn't even necessarily a question of like transforming that energy into something different. It's just from the very get-go raw energy that can go down either road.
For sure. Well, and I think you essentially then become the source of that energy. And if you are sourcing from the tree of life, then that's how it will come out of you.
Yeah.
And if you are sourcing from the tree of knowledge, that's how it's going to come out of you. And I always bring this up too. I just feel like a broken record in this episode, and I'm really sorry. But my very favorite scripture is Romans 12:2, and it says, "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Well, first it says, don't conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed, so that you can know the good, pleasing, and perfect will of God. And I would even argue that that speaks to oneness.
Yeah.
Because what happens when you are cursing people, or you are sourcing from that tree of knowledge, do you wind up knowing and living his will, or do you wind up knowing and living your own will and asking his to align with yours? And that's a hard place too, but can you even get to the place where your will is the same? I don't know. I don't think any of this is easy, but I do think heading that way is ideal. Maybe that's what I should say about it.
Yeah. No, I think for me that's where my focus I think is like I want to start choosing this path because I think it's just a better way of living life.
Yeah.
If I can walk into any situation and my mindset is, where's God in this situation? Where's life in this situation? Then it doesn't matter what the situation is, it'll change my response to it. Like, no, I mean, maybe in a small way, maybe in a huge way, but it'll change my response to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and carrying that may actually change the response from others in that situation as well.
Yeah.
Because if you carry that and you are sourcing from this other place where there isn't an option for good and bad, then chances are other people will notice, whether consciously or unconsciously or subconsciously, however you want to say that, and respond in like. And I think that's an interesting thing. If you want to see a change in the world,
be the change.
I mean, yeah, I don't want to be whatever that is. It's so stereotypical, but that's exactly it. Like, first you have to be able to make a change to actually expect to see any kind of other change. And I think once we start operating this way, the fruit will be evident. Right? And again, it's not like it never happens, but do I go back and forth between trees all the time? I'm like freaking Tarzan. Like, it's just true. I'm not perfect in this, but I have operated from there and I have seen the fruit and it is beautiful.
Yeah.
But I've also had similar situations where I operate from the other tree and the fruit is not so great. And it doesn't last and it doesn't really nourish you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. I like this conversation, and I know some of it is a repeat. So if you listen to every episode we do, I'm sorry. Sort of. but also like it's just good, and it's hopefully it's doing for you what it's doing for us, and it's reminding us that there's another option, that there's something else we can pick.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's good for me, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I really am going to see if it's not if I'm going to make an effort to shift, even if it's 1% of my day.
Yeah.
Because then maybe I'll be able to build up to 2 and then 5 and then 10.
For sure. No,
You have to start somewhere, right?
yeah. And I think it's, you can't have, if you go into it thinking, I'm going to get this right 100% of the time, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. So can you think, I'm going to get this right 5% of the time and then work your way up from there? Because once you achieve 5% of the time, then the story in your brain is, oh, we did it. We accomplished it. But if you're always setting yourself up for failure by choosing a goal that's unreachable, then it just creates discouragement.
Right. Well, and then let me just twist this a little bit too. So if we're giving this effort and we don't always fail at it, can we also source from the tree of life when judging ourselves in our efforts?
That's the first place we should start this practice. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe it's as simple as like, where is God in this? Where is life in this? You said that earlier, Josh. Like even in our own actions, if they're not ideal, but where is God in this? Where is the life in this? Recognize that and then go from there.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
All
Any
right.
final thoughts?
No, I think my thought is like, make your goal with this something achievable and start practicing it. Start trying to find life in it. Start trying to find Christ in other people, and start with yourself.
That's so good. I would request this. If you're listening and you have any examples of this, if you have been living from this place, if you are wanting to start living from there, I would love to hear about it. Our last few episodes have been about connection as well. It's all connection, oneness, all of these things. Like legitimately, we love to hear from other people because this has more to do with connection than it does with just putting content out on the internet. And I really think we're all better together. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for joining today, guys. Thanks for bringing that topic, Josh. It was good. I mean, it was life-giving.
Good catch. All right. We'll see you guys next time.
Hey, thanks for listening. Keep up with us along this journey by liking, subscribing, and becoming a member through YouTube.
Members get exclusive access to bonus content with our guests, deeper dives into topics, and a look into other projects. We're glad to have you here. See you next time.